Hello everyone, I hope you are having a very good discussion. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for all the hard work in bringing together this conference, especially at a difficult time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm very grateful to them. Coming to this presentation, it is about artificial intelligence and mental health. It has two sections. The first section deals with the technological changes that have happened in the last couple of years, especially concerning artificial intelligence and algorithms and Internet of Things, uh, and the way it has impacted our life, our way of being in this world. The second part of the presentation will deal with mental health as a discourse, mental health as a way that we have chosen to respond to all the changes that technology has imposed upon our mental life world. So these are the two sections that we will cover in the course of this presentation. So if we think of technology in our contemporary life, it is almost impossible to imagine our life without it. And if we look back at how the early modern thinkers and the early modernists were imagining technology, someone like Francis Bacon, who's considered a pioneer of modernism, he was looking at technology as something which will help humanity achieve a mastery over nature. But from our contemporary situation, how do we respond to this? How do we respond to Francis Bacon? Do we agree with him? Most of us would say maybe partially. But we have realized that we have not only mastered nature with technology, in certain ways, technology has also mastered us. And this is a collective realization. So, how do we think of technology in a way that is relevant to our contemporary life and the way technology has changed our lives, our reality? The way Heidegger or Bernard Stiegler were thinking about it, it is very different from the way early modernists like Francis Bacon were talking about technology. For instance, Heidegger has been saying that technology encourages forgetting. It makes us dependent upon itself, and successively, generation after generation, we get caught up in this trap of technology, and he sees this as something very dangerous for us as a civilization. On the other hand, Bernard Stiegler is taking a similar position, and he goes on to elaborate upon it and says that there's something called tertiary memory, or phylogenetic memory, as he puts it. Tertiary memory is basically the memory of the machines. He is saying that at every generation of technological innovation and every generation in human civilization, what's happening essentially is certain functional roles of human civilization are getting stored into technology in forms of information, and this happens in form of the design of the machines, the tools, their purpose, their functional processes. So a tool stores the functional memory of a civilization at a particular stage, and then the next stage becomes dependent on this machine. For instance, if we think of matchsticks that we use to, every time we use matchsticks, we have completely forgotten about the other ways of creating fire without this matchstick. So basically what's happening here is that when the matchstick was invented, the functional knowledge of creating fire without matchstick is now stored in the matchstick, and now the next generation will have to depend upon this matchstick to create fire. They will not be able to imagine their existence without it, and this is how we become dependent on technology. Now, if we think of how this is relevant to artificial intelligence, then let us first think of what are the kinds of human functioning that are being stored in the tertiary memory of the machine that is artificial intelligence. Basically, what's happening is all our cognitive associative functions are the ones that are being stored in artificial intelligence as a machine. What I mean by associative cognitive functions is that our thinking and imagination is always associated with the things that we have around us, the entities that we have around us. We associate with them, and that is how we not only understand concepts and imagine and thought, but also how we look at reality itself and also our self-identity. All of this is associative, and we know that artificial intelligence is very good at finding associations between entities, finding associations and patterns between the different data sets and data points. This is what is being stored in the tertiary memory of artificial intelligence. How this is relevant to us is that uh, artificial intelligence has, through the algorithms that are spread all over the Internet of Things, the way we use social media and certain very essential things like Google Maps and all the shopping apps online, all of them have a web of algorithms that play a very small role individually, but when seen collectively, they are playing a very huge role of absorbing the cognitive associative functions of humanity, of human civilization as a whole. That is my argument over here. Look at the way that our reality has been hijacked. Our sense perception, as well as auditory senses, that is our ears, are plugged into a virtual atmosphere, a virtual ecosystem, which is being mediated by these algorithms. So when we look at our phone screens and plug in earphones into our ear, what's we are in an augmented state of reality. The algorithm is picking, it is cherry picking, it is selectively deciding what images are projected into our eyes and what voices or what music or noise we get to hear into our ears, and that is how it is augmenting and taking us one notch above the way we experience reality without these technological gadgets. So what's happening here is our associative sense of reality is augmented and mediated through algorithms now. The purpose that these algorithms have, their goal is to keep us online for as long as possible. That is the purpose of all the algorithmic calculations and computations. They want us to stay on Facebook, YouTube, and all the social media sites for as long as possible, because ultimately these companies would earn more revenue if they have more screen time, because they would project advertisings at us, and that would generate revenue for them. That has been the model of internet for the past decade. Advertising is how revenue comes to them. So but there's another thing that is happening at a deeper level. At a deeper level, we are getting used to this new augmented reality that is being curated and perfectly controlled by these algorithms. But if we look at it, there's a particular paradox that I'm noticing. Slowly and gradually, the length of the songs that we listen to on various social media platforms is getting shortened. The average length of songs has almost halved in the past 5 or 7 years. And also the videos, we are gradually moving from the long video format to short 30-second video formats that have materialized in the form of TikTok, and now the other platforms have also adopted this micro video platform. So while on the one hand we have algorithms that want to constantly keep us on the social media for as long as possible, but also it is in a way shortening our attention span, and that is why these videos and songs are getting successively shorter and shorter. How do we understand this paradox? Why is it happening? I think one possible explanation for this is that these images that are being projected at us, this is happening at a very quick, fast pace. What this is doing is basically it's giving artificial intelligence a manipulative control into our subconscious, and it is now possible for the algorithms to manipulate our actions, emotions, as well as our imagination of a future. These multiple images that they project at us, they form multiple identities at the same point of time, and this is becoming mentally very unsettling for us, because we cannot have a grasp over reality. There's no solid sense of reality that we can have at this point of time. We are constantly slipping from one identity to another. We are constantly switching identities. One example of this will be the quick advertisements that pop at us. The purpose is to make us want that object. The purpose is to produce a need for that object inside us, and also, since this need is going to last for a very short amount of time, the purpose is also to make buying that object very easy for us, and that is where the algorithms come in. They make these online shopping platforms so very accessible, and they also make quick payments possible, because if there is a delay in the time that we want an object and the time that is needed to buy that object, then the project will fail. So there has to be a unity of wanting an object very quickly and also being able to buy that object very quickly. Another example of this will be the political news and political propaganda that has been curated for us on social media these days. Especially we saw in the 2016 US elections, which got very controversial because of the way social media was used for election and the entire Cambridge Analytica expose that happened later on. So the idea was that people's opinion, especially political opinion, could be manipulated through a very targeted advertising that was possible only and only through algorithms, because these algorithms make data collection possible, and they also make classification and calculation of huge data sets possible, which was very difficult, let's say 10 years ago, and not feasible economically, at least. This new algorithmic reality has been defined by Antoinette Rovroy as algorithmic governmentality. She is saying that this new reality is about eliminating uncertainties, eliminating all the multiple possibilities that the future could hold, and then reducing them to the few possible outcomes that has been calculated in the algorithms. This is particularly dangerous because algorithms have reached a point where they no longer need to simplify data for human comprehension. That is, when data is in rudimentary numerical form, humans cannot comprehend it. We need to visualize it in a way that makes sense to us. But for algorithms, that is not required for decision making, and especially at a time when decision making is so very fast that there is no time to explain why algorithm is taking particular actions. And this is what the experts in the field of artificial intelligence have been calling the black box of neural networks, and especially deep neural networks. What they accept, they acknowledge the fact that they do not know what algorithm is doing, and that is merely because the algorithm is required to complete the task at such a fast pace that there is no need for these explanations. We are supposed to follow the future that has been calculated in the algorithm when we cannot even know how that future has been calculated. What were the factors that were being considered by the algorithm? This has led to a very strange kind of a sense of submission that is being produced in us. So all these technological transformations that we discussed in the past few minutes, ultimately they are all boiling down into a weapon that has been hitting at our sense of self-identity, at our sense of ego, and it is breaking our grip over reality. It is slipping between our fingers. The psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan talks about the mirror stage in a child's development, in the child's mental development. There comes a point where the child begins to identify themselves in the mirror as and they have a sense of me or I, as opposed to outside of me or outside of I. They begin to recognize themselves in the mirror. This is a solid, concrete sense of ego that can be grasped by the child now after a particular stage of development. But what the technologies of artificial intelligence and algorithms have been doing to us is that they are breaking our sense of ego. It is dissipating and shattering in a way that we can no longer identify. We can no longer identify who we really are. There's no concrete sense of being that we have, and this is ultimately leading to a very fractured mental state of being. And that brings me to the second part of the presentation, that is the technologies that are involved in coping up with this new mental state. And that is how I read mental health as a discourse. For me, mental health is just another technological interpretation of emotions. It is a way to manage emotions, for the contemporary life, and the various fields that we have, psychotherapy, psychiatry, psychopathology, all of them in a way have been sharing fundamental assumptions about the self, about being. This is particularly important for me in the contemporary times because if we look at the contemporary pop cinema and pop culture and popular culture, we see a sudden recurrence of this figure of a therapist or a psychiatrist, which was quite exceptional 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, every protagonist, almost every protagonist, sees a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist as a part of his or her daily day-to-day life. How did this mental this mental management or this mental therapy session, how did it become so common suddenly in popular culture? Because some time back, if a person was mentally ill, that was considered as a state of exception. And also we'll come to the way we have been defining mental illness, or the category of ill or pathologically ill. But yes, in popular culture and popular cinema, the figure of the therapist and psychiatrist are continuously recurring, and this was not the case some time back. They have moved from the time of exception to the time of routine. And this is not to disregard the real mental suffering that has increased in the past 4 or 5 years because of the accelerated state of being, but I'm merely trying to understand mental health as a way of dealing with these problems, these real problems that we are facing. The associations, the international organizations like the International Psychotherapist Association and the International Psychological Associations, all of them have been classifying various mental behaviors, various mental uneasiness, and procedures of their treatment. The fundamental psychological assumption that is common to all the mental health discourses is that there is a concrete sense of self or ego that is central to their understanding of the self. So it is, I mean the contemporary self that is fractured, and that is so much in a flux that it continuously keeps shifting because of modern technologies. Such an experience of self is pathological for the way mental health discourse has been defining it. I mean, George Kangelham has properly talked about the way pathology is defined by first of all uh, classifying behaviors, and then the pathology becomes the formative force for definition of a normal, and that is how we have been defining normal as an opposition to pathological. Every time a pathology is defined and certain mental behaviors and experiences are defined as mental illness, what happens is the mentally ill, the so-called mentally ill, are then placed outside the normal, and the therapist speaks from a position of normalcy. The therapist assumes a higher position in that hierarchy, where the therapist is normal, and the task that the therapist or the psychiatrist has is to bring back the patient into the normal. In this entire process, what is not happening is that the normal in itself is never being questioned. The normal is never changing. The patient, even though the patient suffered that mental breakdown or that mental uneasiness because of this state of normalcy, but that person is supposed to come back to the same state by not questioning the normal, but by changing something inside the patient. In the contemporary times, what is being changed in the patient is the sense of self or ego that is being imposed upon the patient to help them survive in the normal that had created that pathological condition for them. This entire procedure of treatment is supposed to help them live in the same reality. The reality is never going to change. And in conclusion, I believe that this is the central problem that we are facing when trying to understand and solve the mental pain and uneasiness that people have to go through in contemporary times, especially because of contemporary technology, the modern technology mediated through algorithms and artificial intelligence. I think that a better approach would be not to simply approach mental uneasiness with a purpose of labeling it and classifying it. We need to convert mental difficulties into a site of analysis that questions the forces that have created that condition in the first place. We need to identify the root cause that has created this problem of mental difficulty that people are facing today, so that when the patient comes back to normal, the normal does not have to remain the same. The patient coming back to normal must also mean a new normal for the society to live in. And with this, I conclude my presentation and I'm open to questions. Thank you so much.